Low 20s in the north. Any showers once again tend to disappear inland through the evening, but one or two will continue to affect coastal parts of eastern England. But otherwise clear spells for many on Wednesday night, and another fine day to come on Thursday. Then a change starts to get going on Friday, and more especially on Saturday, turning much more unsettled with some heavy rain.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the issues that need looking at in depth. Keeping me company today is journalist and political consultant Emma Burnell, and here's what's coming up on the show. The backbone of Britain breaking under the weight of the financial crisis, with many pubs and fish and chip shops worried they will have to close their doors forever. And as the Duchess of Sussex makes yet more fantastical claims, does anybody believe a word she says? And if they do, how damaging is that to our royal family? And 1 year on from the UK and US's withdrawal from Afghanistan, MP Tom Tugendhat tells me in an emotional interview how it still affects him. That's what we're looking at for the next hour. What do you want to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. First, though, it's time for GB News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie White, keeping you up to date today on GB News. A man stabbed to death at the Notting Hill Carnival has been named as 21-year-old Takayo Nemhard. A murder inquiry is underway after the Bristol rapper, who performed under the stage name T-Core Stretch, was attacked in the Ladbroke Grove area last night. Well, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, says he's sickened by the incident. The Metropolitan Police made 209 arrests at the event over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 arrests for possessing an offensive weapon. Liz Truss's campaign team says she'll wait until she becomes Prime Minister before finalising her plans for cost of living support. The Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard the full advice, which she won't have until and if she's appointed as PM. However, the Labour Party says Liz Truss is causing families unnecessary worry. The Labour chair, Annalise Dodds, told us Liz Truss needs to act now.
Energy price rises, as you know, they're a big contributor to inflation. If we manage to stop that price rise, that price cap rise going through, then we would be reducing the rate of inflation. That would, for example, get the cost of government borrowing down as well. So it's really important that Truss actually listens to what Labour's calling for and stops flip-flopping about with all these different plans that she seems to be floating, actually gets a grip and says that she'll commit to Labour's plan.
Well, meanwhile, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who's in North Dorset today, has announced the government is going to provide a further package of support to help people with the cost of energy.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Pubs and brewers across the UK are at risk, they say, of closure within months amid energy price hikes of nearly 300% in some cases, according to industry bosses. 6 of the UK's biggest firms have signed an open letter to the government asking for action to avoid irreversible damage to the sector. Some pub owners say they're now struggling to find suppliers who are even willing to power their venues. Well, the Chancellor is going to travel to the United States this week to try to find joint solutions for the cost of living crisis. Nadhim Zahawi is going to meet with government officials and bankers in New York and Washington, D.C. The Treasury says he's going to push for cooperation on energy security, tackling spiralling prices and economic growth. BT and Openreach workers are staging fresh strikes over pay as the summer of industrial unrest across the country continues. The Communication Workers Union says 40,000 of its members at BT Group are showing serious determination to get a decent wage rise. The General Secretary of the Communications Workers Union in Lincolnshire and South York, Mark Pastorelli, says the government must get involved in the negotiations.
Got strikes going on all over the country for different reasons. Well, it's for one reason. The reason is money. It's about the cost of living going up. What we need is the government to take action here. Yeah. We need their inputs, but they're not doing anything. I can't see them doing anything at the moment.
Ukraine says it's taking back territory occupied by Russian forces in several areas of the front line after launching a counterattack. Ukrainian forces have launched an offensive near Kherson in the south of the country. The Kremlin, though, are insisting that the counter-assault has failed. Britain's Ministry of Defence say long-range precision strikes continue, though, to disrupt Russia's resupply efforts. Iraqi cleric Mukhtar al-Sadr has told his followers to end their protests after nearly 2 days of violent clashes in central Baghdad. 22 people have been killed in the demonstrations, which started after al-Sadr announced his retirement from politics. Dozens more were injured after protesters stormed the presidential palace. Iraq's government's been deadlocked since Mr al-Sadr's party won the largest share of seats in parliamentary elections in October, but not enough to secure a majority government. The UN Secretary-General is warning that Pakistan is facing a monsoon on steroids after catastrophic flooding that killed over 1,100 people. Antonio Guterres is urging the world to help. He's launched a $160 million appeal. He said the funds raised would provide over 5 million people with food, water, sanitisation and health support. More than 33 million people have been affected by flooding in the country. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
The economic crisis rapidly unfolding across Europe will be drawn into sharp focus the next time fuel bills arrive for millions of households around the country. Bills that will not even reflect the hours of central heating that will be desperately needed as nights draw in and temperatures drop. As countless people will face a struggle, the likes of which we have not seen in many of our lifetimes, businesses up and down the country may also be forced to close. Businesses that were once the backbone of our high streets and the beating heart of Britain. Perhaps the two things most associated with our small island, the local pub and fish and chips, could be torn from our communities as they close their doors for the last time, unable to carry on. Well, joining me now is George Morey, who's the manager of Knight's Fish Restaurant in Glastonbury. George, I mean, I understand cooking oil's gone up 20%, cod up by an average 75%. That's even before you're getting the big energy bills that you're likely to see over winter. The outlook's bleak, isn't it? How are you going to manage?
Well, it's something that I think the government need to address, really, not just for the domestic setting, but also for businesses, like you say. You consider the usage of your families at home, their gas supplies are very menial compared to what a business like ours has to use on a daily basis for 8 hours a day. You are burning that gas and it is costing you a fortune. You try and balance your prices out to absorb that, but at the same time, you can't whack those prices up because you don't want to lose your customers. So, our industry now is looking at that way of perhaps changing our opening hours, reducing our opening hours in such a way that people won't be able to come and have their fish and chips when they want to, that we'll have to dictate to them when they can have fish and chips.
Do you find when you look at your company's ledger that perhaps you're already in crisis and have this foreboding sense that things can only get worse?
I don't think so, strictly speaking. I mean, for us, we're a well-established business, family run for over 100 years. We've been through world wars and come out the other side. We've always found a way to make it work. However, I believe there is worrying, atmosphere for smaller, independent businesses that are perhaps just started and they have this overwhelming, cost increase that they have to consider. But for us, and I think overall we are a resilient industry. We may lose a few of the smaller businesses, but, we're doing our best, really.
I mean, do you think it could reach the stage where you would have to think about shutting?
We're lucky. We have a restaurant and we're in quite a touristy part of the county of Somerset. Glastonbury has its very unique USP, really, of being quite alternative, quite free-spirited. For us, at least, we notice a decrease in what people are buying. But I think resiliency has been our motto, really. And I think people these days do understand that fish and chips isn't as cheap to get hold of as it used to be. So hopefully not.
Yeah, let's hope not either. Resilience really is a great word for the British and hopefully a great word for you and your industry. Thank you so much for coming on. That's George Morey, who's the manager at Knight's Fish Restaurant. Well, let's talk now to Christopher Snowdon, who's head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Christopher, it's great to have you back on the programme. I mean, there we were talking about fish and chips. The other, great paradigm industry of the UK are our pubs. And today you've had bosses at 6 big pub chains saying many of their establishments will have to close and close for good. And that's not even looking at the independent pubs. How on earth can businesses carry on during winter if there's not government intervention?
I think it's going to be extremely difficult, and I guess some of them will close. Pubs are facing very similar pressures to fish and chip shops in that their inputs, beer's gone up, food's obviously gone up, and above all, you've got the gas and electricity going up. So, it's bad enough for a household spending, £1,000 a year on energy, and that's going up to £3,000, possibly £4,000. Then you look at a business that's got a bill of £15,000, £20,000, potentially going up as high as £80,000. Clearly, it's not affordable. Unfortunately, it's not also affordable for the government to bail out every single business because those costs are so great. I suspect that you will see businesses closing at least for winter, or maybe heavily reducing their opening hours. But yeah, it's an absolutely terrible position.
I mean, the government did intervene quite a lot during COVID when they launched the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, a scheme, of course, that has come under a fair amount of criticism. But do you think that they need to be regarding as a situation now with the same level of crisis and doing something extraordinary to make sure that small independent companies stay afloat?
I just don't think there is the money there. I mean, the government doesn't have any money. It's £2.4 trillion in debt. Debt has gone up enormously over the course of COVID. I mean, I just don't think that they have the ability to be borrowing without putting the country in very, very serious financial trouble to the extent that in a few years we might have to default on our debts. I mean, £1 trillion of debt is bad enough. 2.4 trillion, which is what it is now, is colossal. Going up to 3 trillion. You know, the current handouts for people to pay their gas and electricity bills has come to about £37 billion. You will be looking at hundreds of billions of pounds in order to bail out businesses. And if you're going to bail out pubs and fish and chip shops, you have to bail out other businesses. They've all got they're all going to have the radiators on this winter. I mean, I think it's the road to ruin for the government finances. Unfortunately, we just don't have the credit really to carry on handing out money to people whenever there's a problem, even though this problem is very serious, as was COVID. I mean, the money really isn't there. The Bank of England isn't printing any more money, which is understandable given the rate of inflation. And so we would be paying significantly more to borrow more cash at this point, partly because interest rates have gone up and partly because inflation's gone up and partly because the government isn't doing any more quantitative easing. So I really don't think the government will seriously consider help on that scale.
And I mean, during COVID, we suddenly had bandied about this pretty horrific term, the new normal. And we saw people stuck at home ordering more and more things online, things being delivered to their door. Is there a risk that this economic crisis that we're now facing could really change the way that Britain looks? Quintessential British things like pubs and fish and chip shops, small businesses. Everyone always wants the local butcher and the local baker on their high street, but more and more those things are disappearing. Could the current crisis essentially sound the death knell of, the old normal?
I don't think so, really. I mean, things like the butcher and baker, they've been kind of superseded for a lot of people by supermarkets, whereas the fish and chip shop is something unique. You can't really get fish and chips like that anywhere else. Same with the experience of going to the pub. Of course, lots of things have been killing off the British pub for many, many years. Some regulatory things like the smoking ban, but often lots of just social changes. People have got nicer, warmer houses to live in. They've got nice big TVs and so on. So there are more alternatives to people as compared to the 1970s. So, pubs have been in steady decline. I think that even if there are closures over the course of the winter, I would expect the pub industry to bounce back.
Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the programme. That's Christopher Snowdon, who is the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Well, joining me in the studio throughout the show today is journalist and political consultant Emma Burnell. Emma, do you know what always strikes me? In a situation like this where you are waiting for the government to do something, I wonder what, the potential of people power would be if there was a message that went out there, maybe save on your own bills by not cooking and going and propping up your local chippy, going and meeting friends in the pub and, putting money behind their bar so they can keep their lights on.
I mean, I think in an ideal world that would be wonderful, but I just don't know that many people who can prioritise somebody else's bills right now as compared to their own. Certainly until we get some kind of certainty about what help the government are going to be offering domestic users, people are not going to be prioritising going and saving their local pub, which is a terrible shame because for a number of reasons. First of all, obviously, because they are these vital, quite often small independent businesses, but they're also the hubs of communities. And they're often places where we see people that we live alongside but don't know. And I think that the local pub can be such a way of meeting the people you wouldn't normally meet. If we do revert just to socialising with the people we already know in our homes, I think we're going to go further and further into our separate cocoons. And I just think that would be a social shame as much as there are huge economic shames apart of all of this.
I mean, the media have been talking about this cost of living crisis for months now, and, the latest price cap has gone up. How bad do you think things are going to get?
I'm very, very concerned. My 80% on my own bills is £100 a month. If my mortgage were also to go up by just 2 interest points, that's £200 extra a month. Now, I work hard, I earn a decent living, but I don't earn so much that £300 a month wouldn't be an enormous shock to me economically. And I'm in a decent position. So I'm really worried about lots of people who are not... what I suspect the government will do will help the very, very poorest, those people who are on universal credit, for example. But there's a layer above who aren't receiving any government support but are very low paid, whose wages will be absolutely squeezed because they might get 2, 3, 4, even 5%, significantly lower than inflation. And that's the people who are going to really struggle. And I'm very concerned that we're just diminishing people's lives so much during this crisis, and we don't know what effect that's going to have on the other side of it all.
I mean, in a strange way, can we take succor from the fact that this isn't just us? This is a European-wide, in fact, it's a worldwide problem. Energy prices have gone up globally, and a lot of people have been affected by the war in Ukraine. Or is that sort of, finding false comfort?
I don't know how comforting it is the problem. Yes, this is an international problem. There are countries that are better equipped to have a cushion to deal with it than we are. We have been managing our economy much like one of those sort of just-in-time people where your car part is made in five different countries. Our economy has been run along the same sort of deep efficiency cuts that have left us with no capacity to learn, grow, change and build for the long term. And that, of course, has meant that when we've had these spiralling and rolling crises, there's just not been that space, that headroom to do the things that need to be done.
Emma, thank you. Well, I want to know your views on this. Are you planning to maybe turn off your heating and spend the evening in the pub instead, especially if it might help out your local boozer? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, the Duchess of Sussex. Yep, she's given an explosive interview to a US magazine. Surprise, surprise. We'll be discussing some of the revelations and whether they'll be damaging to the royal family. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast. See you in a bit.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in one or two spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but one or two could continue to arrive into eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example, and temperatures will fall 12 to 14 Celsius for most, but where we get some sheltered spots away from the wind inland, well, we'll see single figures and a few mist and fog patches first thing. North Wales, northwest England, southern Scotland, for example. They'll soon clear away. And then for the vast majority, it's a fine start to the day. Sunny spells once again. Showers will develop a bit more across northern England, North Wales, North Midlands. But away from those showers, it's sunny spells. I think more sunshine compared with Tuesday, and temperatures up into the mid-20s in the south, high teens, low 20s in the north. Clearing skies once again overnight, and with light winds inland, temperatures will fall away once again into the single figures in some sheltered spots. Otherwise, we're looking at 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn on Thursday. The Thursday will start off with plenty of fine and bright weather once again. Best of the sunshine in the north and the west. There'll still be one or two showers into the east coast, and again, they'll develop a bit more widely across northern England, the North Midlands and North Wales by the afternoon. But we keep the sunny spells in many places well into the afternoon. A change on the way, though, on Friday and Saturday. The weather turns much more unsettled.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. For a woman brought up in Hollywood who has carved out a career as an actress, married a prince, who lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion, who wears designer clothes and flies by private jet, it's amazing quite how many toe-curling stories of her victimhood make it into the press. I am, of course, talking about Meghan Markle, who has done yet another interview where she explosively claims members of the press called her children by the N-word. She also claimed when she married Harry, she was told people rejoiced in the streets, like when Mandela was released from prison. Clickbait it may be, but it's beginning to reveal something quite troubling, that this woman appears to have extremely deep-rooted issues. Whatever next? Well, royal commentator Caroline Aston joins me now to discuss this further. Caroline, I mean, it seems to me, you know, just reading some of the headlines, not just in Britain, but around the world off the back of this interview, that she might have pushed it a bit too far and the tide is turning and that the stock of Harry and Meghan could well start to plummet. Can we look forward to that, do you think?
Well, I think the timing of this is absolutely crucial because, of course, we're on the very eve of course, the anniversary of Princess Diana's tragic death. And I think that's no accident. I think that you can only squeeze so much lemon juice out of the lemon of publicity. And, of course, that really is the oxygen, the raison d'etre of both the Sussexes. So I think there will be a diminuendo. And I think by now it's fairly obvious they've given up on the British market for their brand. And most of what they're doing is aimed very firmly at the Americans, who I'm sure are both diverted by this. And perhaps if anyone listening to this has South African heritage, will be angered by the comparison of the marriage of Meghan and her prince to Nelson Mandela's release from Robben Island, 27 years in appalling conditions, that great beacon of democracy, integrity, courage. And Meghan apparently was told there was dancing in the streets of a similar kind when she married her prince. I think she will come to eat those words.
What is going on here? She also said sort of menacingly that she hasn't had to decide a non-disclosure. Right now, she's still healing, so she's not ready to talk. I mean, she's doing a lot of talking, isn't she? But is there something wrong with this woman? I mean, I'm going to put it bluntly. Is there something wrong with her?
You mean, is she narcissistic? Has she really got this idea of victimhood so firmly into her mind that it's beginning to affect her every doing and utterance? I think you're right. Maybe some counselling is required here because this is becoming so vituperative. This is a war of attrition. Neither side can win. You have two brothers who I'm sure the late Princess Diana would have hated to see at odds with each other like this, who are now deeply divided with, I think, little hope of a mending of the rift between them if this goes on. Maybe Harry and his wife should sit down and talk a little bit more, and certainly have a talk with their publicists who appear to be orchestrating a campaign that is aimed at yet more and more publicity in the run-up, of course, to Harry's tell-all memoir, about which the press has gone rather quiet at the moment as we wait for the next revelations. Certainly, Meghan Markle has become a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the royal family. And yes, they too will be looking over their shoulders at what the next sortie in this battle of words will be.
I mean, with everything that comes out, especially, you know, Meghan saying that Prince Harry has lost his father and Charles, although that's sort of somehow being disputed, that she might not have meant that. This is really good. It's burning bridges, isn't it, for Harry? So let's play this forward. I mean, cast your mind to in 10 years' time. Are Harry and Meghan still going to be happily married in Montecito, or do you think there'll be some deep regrets coming from Harry?
I think probably he feels a degree of regret now, but he's so caught up in this new lifestyle. But for how long will this be satisfying? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And of course, one of the reasons I think all this is happening now is because the big giants, Spotify, Netflix, who've offered these two vast sums of money so far, have had very little return for the investment. So now the pressure's being ramped up. The Netflix documentary about their love story is being prepared. And yes, the Sussexes will go forward and attempt to justify the vast sums of money being spent on them. Myself, I think they're a one-trick pony. You can only exploit these tales of victimhood, of betrayal, of being hurt by life in the royal family. But for a couple who left these shores to find freedom and security and privacy, they seem to be making an awful lot of noise to keep the public spotlight on themselves. But I think this will fade as more and more people become disenchanted and, to be honest with you, fairly fed up with the whole thing.
Yeah, Caroline, I couldn't agree more. Caroline Aston, their royal commentator. Well, I'm going to come back to you, Emma. I mean, it's interesting what Caroline was saying about people become disillusioned. And what we've got essentially is a remix of records that have already been released. And if you were advising them, if you were their publicist, would you say, come on, Meghan, stop playing the victim card?
I mean, I care so little about any of the royals at all that I would struggle to find the right words to say. I mean, don't get me wrong, I grew up watching Dynasty. I love a soap opera about rich people behaving badly, and it doesn't seem like anyone's behaving particularly well. But I think that if she wants, her brand, as far as I can tell, is to be the person who wants to sail forward and rise above. Well, in which case, sail forward and rise above, go to work, be the modern female role model that she's perfectly capable of being. Go to work, produce the goods, and be that. And then I think if you don't want to be a royal, and why would you, don't be a royal and stop making interviews about being a royal.
Drop the title. That'd be a good start, Emma. Thank you. Let me know what you think. You know the address by now, gbnews@gbnews.uk. You are with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, MP Tom Tugendhat reflects on his time in Afghanistan and the UK's chaotic withdrawal 1 year ago today in a moving, exclusive interview. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says people will face tough months ahead due to the soaring cost of living. During a visit in Dorset today, Boris Johnson promised more announcements would come this week on energy security, including nuclear power. But he said it would be up to his successor, either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, to provide a further package of support.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. The Labour Party says the delay's causing families unnecessary worry. But the Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard the full advice, which she won't have until and if she's appointed as PM. The whole of the southwest of England is now in drought following some of the driest conditions in nearly 90 years. The Environment Agency says Bristol, Somerset, Dorset, South Gloucestershire and parts of Wiltshire have all moved to drought status. Well, that now means that 11 of the 14 Environment Agency areas in England are now affected. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
One year ago today, planes took off from Kabul airport in the chaotic withdrawal of Western troops, leaving behind many who had fought for their country's freedom, leaving countless Afghans in the hands of a vengeful Taliban. For those who served in the country, friends were lost, while painful memories remain. And I spoke to one of them, MP Tom Tugendhat, and this is what he had to say. The withdrawal from Afghanistan 1 year ago today. Take us back to this time last year and what your feelings were as you watched the scenes unfold at the airport.
Well, it really started off a couple of weeks ago, as you know, or rather a year and a couple of weeks ago. And like many people, I was doing other things on holiday, and I started to get more and more desperate phone calls from friends in Lashkar and Kabul, in places where I'd served. And you know, the advance that we were watching on the TV and listening to on the radio started to become more dramatic as town after town fell to the Taliban. And friends, you know, interpreters who had served alongside government officials who had worked with soldiers who had fought side by side with, started to understandably get very worried about their families across Afghanistan and try and get them out. And it started to get pretty desperate. So by the time we got to a year ago today, you know, it'd been a hell of a build-up of people who had been part of, in many ways, part of our units, part of our teams, who were queuing up like refugees at their own airport, looking abandoned and looking lost.
You must have felt incredibly helpless in that situation.
Yeah, I think we all did. I mean, in the early days, it was, you know, it was doing a lot of shouting, really. Shouting as loud as I could to try and get our government, other governments, to realise quite how serious this was, and giving interview after interview to try and get people to listen, talking to ministers, talking to others behind the scenes to try and get people to act. And then it became a sort of a network, as so many of us were so frustrated. There was a sort of collection of ex-soldiers and officers who were getting together, not just in the UK, but Australia, the United States, France, you know, a few from other places as well, to try and get those who we'd worked with out
You know Afghanistan, you know it very well. Very few people watching this will have any idea of what that country is like, what the people are like. To them, Afghanistan must seem a very remote place, a place that really should have nothing to do with the UK. How would you describe Afghanistan and its people?
Well, Afghanistan is an incredibly beautiful country. I mean, it's mountainous. It's to say it's rugged is to understate it. It's even the landscape is pretty hostile. The deserts are pretty harsh and the mountains are pretty fierce. And the people in some ways match it, but the people are very, very kind as well. I mean, I had the good fortune of working there for on and off for about 4 years. And one year I was working down in Helmand province. I was working with the governor and his team and working very, very closely with Afghans. And it was a fantastic privilege. It was hugely interesting, as you can imagine, but it was also extremely challenging. And I got to listen to the stories that people tell as they sit around in the evenings. You know, there's no beer, but people sit around and drink green tea and eat walnuts and raisins and tell stories about who said what at what wedding, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and what the dispute over water is about, and who beat up whose brother and all that sort of stuff. And it's, it's storytelling of the old kind. And it was fantastic to listen and to understand a country that's so different from ours. And the reality is, look, of course it's very remote from us, but sadly 9/11, again, 21 years ago, taught us that even remote countries have a direct effect on our lives.
A lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of lives even have been lost in the West's battle to try and bring democracy to Afghanistan, to keep out the forces of organisations such as the Taliban, who now run the country. Does it sometimes feel to you like it's just been a huge, huge tragic waste?
I mean, for me, it was a hugely life-defining moment. It was, as you you can imagine, 4 years of your life doing something and then to see it come to nothing. It's pretty heartbreaking, but that's not the worst of it. And the worst of it is, you bury a lot of friends, you see a lot of injuries. In fact, last year, as that, turmoil was reignited, a lot of people who you thought were okay turned out they weren't. And it was like, tearing the plaster off an old wound and watching it bleed again. It was really painful. So I think for a lot of people, it was a very difficult time. Well, still is actually. And I, what can I say? It does feel very difficult. Half the Afghan population, 15 million or so women and girls, have just effectively been thrown straight back into slavery. But it's also important to remember that a lot of people demonstrated something that we didn't think would happen. When those planes went in 9/11 and when that attack happened in 2005, we thought we'd be fighting Islamic terrorism on our streets for years and decades into the future. And we didn't. Part of that's down to the operations that we fought. And part of that is down to the courage of those individuals who I was lucky enough to serve with and meet, many of them Afghan as well. And there's a lot of us who've stayed in touch, actually. And it's one of the WhatsApp groups that helped to rescue a few people a year ago sort of came alive again this morning with people just sort of wishing best of luck and discussing who else there still is to get out and how we help people. So yeah, I mean, it's been one of those days when a lot of things come flooding back, and not all of them good, because let's not forget, there's a lot of people who we didn't get out, a lot of people I worked with who were incredibly brave, who texted, called, begged for help from places around Afghanistan. And when I tried to get back in touch with them, there was no answer. Well, there hasn't been an answer for a year, so I suspect the Taliban killed them.
I mean, you can hear in the way he's speaking, it's a personal horror for him. And it's hard not to be moved listening to that. But he does make, I suppose, one note of optimism, saying that a lot of this was about the threat of Islamism on our soil, and we didn't think we'd be able to defeat terrorism. And perhaps he is right. We haven't seen anything like the sort of threat that we're used to. I mean, can we take some sort of, optimism from that it wasn't all just a waste of time?
I do hope so. I think there has to be something that's come out of it. I mean, I think we didn't just fail the people of Afghanistan a year ago. I think we failed them for 20 years in many ways. I don't mean people like Tom, who clearly worked very hard, very closely with them. But I think that having gone in, something I was in support of, we didn't do the best job. We were diverted into Iraq, a lot of resources. We will never know, and I don't like generally kind of alternate histories and pretending everything would have been different if people had only listened to me. But I do feel like the war that we went to fight in Afghanistan was a war about human rights, and it was a war about stopping terrorism. And I hope that at least the latter was certainly reduced as a result. I don't feel, watching the situation, particularly for women and girls in that country now, that we've managed the former at all. And I think in particular what we failed in the last year are the people who helped us for those 20 years, who are still there, the people Tom was talking about that are stuck behind and who really put themselves on the line to help the British and American forces and just feel abandoned now. And that, for me, is a huge tragedy, because if we were there for nobody else, we should have been there for them.
Yeah. Well, our security and home affairs editor Mark White has also been looking back at what has happened in Afghanistan and where we're at today.
Months on from the chaos and the carnage of a sudden, badly managed withdrawal, Afghanistan has all but disappeared from our nightly news bulletins. Yet right across this country, they're living with the consequences of a decision made a world away in Washington. Here in the capital and elsewhere, the queues at the UN's World Food Programme feeding stations are constant. Afghans who just a year earlier held down respectable jobs, now forced to beg for handouts.
My husband was martyred the day the Taliban came to power a year ago. We had some savings from his service to the Afghan army over the last 15 years. Now all that is finished.
People cannot afford things from my shop now. There's no business for people.
The sanctions have had a huge impact on our businesses. The Afghan assets frozen by America are essential for food security and the value of our currency.
The United Nations has described the situation here as the world's largest humanitarian disaster, with over half the population facing the threat of starvation. It is the outcome many had feared, that they'd warned would follow from the decision by US President Joe Biden to exit Afghanistan 2 decades after coalition forces first entered this country. The Taliban took full advantage, and as they rolled towards and then into the capital, panicked Afghans, many who'd worked for the government and coalition forces, scrambled to get out. At Kabul airport, US, British and other troops tried their best to manage the withdrawal, but increasingly desperate locals broke through the airport's perimeter. In horrifying scenes, some jumped onto one departing US aircraft, only to plunge to their deaths as it gathered speed and took off. As the world watched, President Biden doubled down on his decision to pull out.
I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
Just days before the end of the pullout, in the huge sewage canal alongside the airport, where thousands had been queuing, a suicide bomb attack by the Islamic State. 13 members of the US military were among the more than 180 killed. Right across the political spectrum in the US and beyond, President Biden's handling of the Afghan withdrawal has been widely criticised, branded a low point in America's standing in the world. Many analysts believe it simply emboldened autocrats like Vladimir Putin.
The message that our withdrawal sent to the world, which I believe helped encourage President Putin to invade Ukraine. I think the reduction in US international credibility and reliability, I think, has made the world much, much less safe.
In the years since the pullout, the UK has taken more than 20,000 Afghans as part of the resettlement programme. But many more remain, trapped in country and unable to leave. Throughout Afghanistan, Taliban promises they've changed, that women could continue to work and girls would get a full education, have fallen way short. On the security side, fears remain that extremist groups will continue to take hold here. One Western documentary maker who spent a significant amount of time with the Taliban has documented their continued fight against Islamic State. It's one extremist group he says the Taliban seem determined to confront.
The strong part of the Taliban is actually security. They have been fighting Islamic State for 6 years now. So that's the thing they can do. And they are not doing this to satisfy the Western audiences. They are doing this because they want the Islamic State eliminated in Afghanistan.
But last month's US drone strike, which targeted and killed the al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan, highlights the continued security concerns here. Ayman al-Zawahiri had been living in a property in Kabul, reportedly owned by a top aide to a Taliban government official. 12 months on from the Western withdrawal here, the Taliban may be celebrating, but the extremist threat remains. The humanitarian crisis is worsening, and the freedoms spoken of by the new government are yet another false promise to the long-suffering people of this beautiful but troubled nation. Mark White, GB News.
And now, women in England and Wales will have permanent access to at-home abortion pills from today. But according to GB News, there's been a significant rise in the number of women since the medication became available. Pills by post were temporarily introduced during the pandemic and allowed women to be sent them without a face-to-face consultation. But figures obtained exclusively by this channel show the number of ambulance call-outs increased by 27%, with some trusts taking double the number of calls from women concerned after taking the pills. Alice Porter has more on this and a warning that some viewers may find her report disturbing.
Kirsty was in a coercive relationship during the first lockdown. Her boyfriend forced her to order abortion pills over the phone, which she took beyond the 10-week limit.
I made the phone call to the abortion clinic, sort of hoping that they'd sort of question my decision, because I knew deep down that I didn't want to do it. And I didn't have any checks. They didn't even offer me a scan, so I wasn't even sure. I wasn't sure of what the dates anyway of when I first found out I was pregnant.
So you got the abortion pills. Just explain what the process was like when you took the tablets.
Terrible cramps for hours. And then once I lifted my blanket, I was saturated in blood. And it wasn't my blood, it was my baby's blood.
Before the pandemic, all women who wanted an abortion had to be seen in person by a medical professional. They'd be assessed and scanned. If they were in the early stages of pregnancy, they'd be given 2 abortion pills, one to take in the clinic and one to take home. Now, of course, that wasn't practical during lockdown, so the government introduced a scheme where women would be sent abortion pills in the post to take at home. But with no one seeing them in person, has there been enough safeguarding? We sent a Freedom of Information request to all the ambulance trusts in England. Of the 6 which responded, all showed that since abortion pills by post became available in 2020, there's been a rise in the number of women ringing 999 about abortion pills and an increase in ambulance dispatches. London saw the number of call-outs go from 93 in 2019 to 150 in 2020, a 61% increase. In the east of England, the number of call-outs went from 7 in 2019 to 24 in 2020, a rise of 243%. And in the southwest, the number of call-outs went from 33 in 2019 to 74 in 2020, up by 124%. The National Network of Designated Healthcare Professionals has also recorded cases of women taking abortion pills when they're too far along, resulting in a small number of aborted babies being born alive. As a result, one ambulance trust has spent £7,000 on making special mannequins to train their staff when confronted with this difficult situation. But Anne Farady is former head of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service and says for the vast majority of women, at-home abortions are completely safe.
The only downside is that sometimes a doctor or a nurse can perhaps pick up cues by seeing someone in front of them that they wouldn't pick up remotely. But we can't organise medical care on the basis of just the very few. We have to really look at what's best for everyone in these circumstances, and home use pills by post definitely is.
While at-home abortions may not suit some women, today's announcement does allow everyone the opportunity of deciding which option is best for them. Alice Porter, GB News.
Yeah, well, Emma, is this a feather in the hat of women's rights? You know, access to medication discreetly at home? Or is this almost an act of negligence that, you know, not taking something? This isn't the morning after pill. It's a big decision and, you know, with pretty big side effects.
There are big side effects. I mean, the issue I might take with your report is there was increases in percentages of call-outs, but we didn't see the equivalent increases in percentages of how many women were taking the pills. So it wasn't quite clear whether this was lots of people having a problem or the people who would have had a problem anyway in taking something in a clinical situation. More increased access to women's health is a good thing. Should it also come with better information and better care? Yes, of course it should. And I think that's the issue here. If women are not, as I understand from the BPAS response, being properly informed that this is not like a heavy period, the bleeding will be far heavier and the cramping and the pains will be far more. And that should be something a woman who's taking these pills should be properly prepared for. That doesn't mean that taking these pills isn't the right thing for those women. And on women like poor Kirsty, who is clearly in a terrible situation, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have these available for lots and lots of other people. But my goodness, do we need to invest far more in dealing with domestic violence and coercive control situations.
Emma Burnell, thank you so much for all of your thoughts today. It's been a pleasure having you on the programme. That's about it for now. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, it's the briefing with Darren McCaffrey. First, though, it's time for a look at the weather forecast. I'll see you tomorrow.
Also,
hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in 1 or 2 spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but 1 or 2 could continue to arrive into eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example, and temperatures will fall 12 to 14 Celsius for most, but where we get some sheltered spots away from the wind inland, well, we'll see single figures and a few mist and fog patches first thing. North Wales, northwest England, southern Scotland, for example. They'll soon clear away, and then for the vast majority it's a fine start to the day. Sunny spells once again. Showers will develop a bit more across northern England, North Wales, North Midlands, but away from those showers it's sunny spells. I think more sunshine compared with Tuesday, and temperatures up into the mid-20s in the south, high teens, low 20s in the north. Clearing skies once again overnight, and with light winds inland, temperatures will fall away once again into the single figures in some shelter spots. Otherwise, we're looking at 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn on Thursday. The Thursday will start off with plenty of fine and bright weather once again. Best of the sunshine in the north and the west. There'll still be 1 or 2 showers into the east coast, and again, they'll develop a bit more widely across northern England, the North Midlands and North Wales by the afternoon. But we keep the sunny spells in many places well into the afternoon. A change on the way, though, on Friday and Saturday. The weather turns much more unsettled.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, it is finally just under a week until the next Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister is announced. They'll be under an awful lot of pressure to act on day one, not least of all to tackle the cost of living crisis. We'll be speaking to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, about that in Westminster for the latest. It's exactly a year since the US also officially withdrew from Afghanistan, with concerns that the world is much less safe. Meanwhile, the UN claims that Afghan citizens are in survival mode 1 year on. We'll be showing you an exclusive report from our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Ukraine's counter-offensive has begun in the Kherson region, and it's well underway with multiple strikes in efforts to try and retake the city that fell to Russian forces all the way back in March.